Then she stood up, as abruptly as she had from their cafe table, and took him to the window and looked out towards the sea. The window was thin, and the saint himself in the coloured glass rather blocked the view. But it was not so much a matter of looking and seeing, more of listening, of her murmuring and his listening. "We played down there," she said. "You and your friend. What was she called, your friend?" "She was called Arwen." "A name like yours," he said. "We were very like," she said. "We came after school when the evenings were long, and at weekends, summer and winter when we chose. Nobody minded in those days. She was from here, I was an incomer, but I learned her language at school, and together we never spoke anything else. Except that we had our own speech too, speech within a speech, foreign and secret. We used that sometimes for the things which mattered most. When we found anything especially pretty, we brought it in here, splashed it from the well, and laid it on the altar." "A flower, you mean? Or a shell?" "A shell, a flower, a starfish, a bit of whitened wood, anything pretty or especially strange. We wetted it and laid it on the altar under that saint's window. Nobody minded in those days. And if we found any creature that had died, we brought that in too, splashed it and buried it outside, close under the western wall, and made a little mound of stones. An oiled-up seagull, a fish, even a crab or a rat, anything that had lived the way humans live and was dead. We looked out for such things as keenly as for pretty things fit to go on the tabletop. And always we drank, lifting our hands to one another, just as you and I have done now. And every time we drank, we looked each in the other's eyes and made a wish. There's a lot you don't know about me, and one thing is this, that I am afraid my friend Arwen is dying. Do you have a pen? Do you have a scrap of paper? I didn't think I would do this, but now I feel I must." He carried a pencil. It fitted into the spine of a handy blue notebook. He tore out a page, handed her the pencil. She used the altar as a desk and wrote, "Please wish for my dear friend Arwen, who is very ill." She folded the note and slotted it in among others in a sort of lattice on the south wall. "Now come out," she said. "I want to show you the sea properly, not through a narrow window." But as soon as they were out and had climbed over the rampart of new rocks and had broached the empty sands, she halted, turned to him, and alarmed him by her helpless agitation. "What is it?" he asked. "Oh, I should have written it in Welsh," she answered. "But more people will understand it in English. But it's closer to her in Welsh, and it may work better." "Do it then." And he handed her the notebook with the pencil fitted in. Do I even know the words any more?" "Try." She closed her eyes, faced him, waited. Then she said in a rush, "Gynnoch dymuniad I Arwen welach. Mae hin sal iawn." "Good," he said. "Now go back and write it." It seemed he waited quite some time. When she came out of the chapel she was barefoot, carrying her shoes. So he took his off also, stuffed the socks into them, laced them together, watched her cross the rocks. "Your notebook is full of things," she said. "So much I don't know." Then she took his hand and led him, so it felt, out where the sea must be. "I came out here with my father once," she said, "with Arwen. He walked between us, holding our hands. He didn't speak Welsh, though he knew many of the words because of his studies in local history. It was strange to be with Arwen speaking English. My father asked her questions. I could tell that he liked the way she talked. She was very pretty. You would have liked her too. My father had read that before they built the chapel on the beach, they built one out on the flats in what was then a forest. He asked Arwen was it true. She said she believed it was. My father wanted to see evidence of the forest, if not of the chapel, and on that afternoon, when, according to his chart, the tides were exceptionally big, he took us out, the two of us, to have a look. We walked and walked, like now. The sea was quite invisible. We were the only people out. I don't think he should have taken us there, do you? But he consulted his watch very often and kept an eye on the horizon, where the sea must be. And at last we did come to the forest, the stumps and traces of it, a sort of herd, emergent or disappearing over a vast area of sand, as I remember now. We shan't go so far today. I'm not sure of the tide. But another day, when the tides are very big, we'll work it out exactly, and I'll take you to where you can see the stumps of that great forest, if they are still to be seen. The sand moves, you know. It covers and uncovers. But the tide comes in very fast, faster than a man can run, so my father said. He told us that out there in that vast graveyard of a forest. I don't think he should have told us that, do you? He told Arwen particularly. I didn't like him doing that. So if there really was a forest, he said, perhaps there really was a chapel too, with its own well, of course, like the one on the beach. But we'd never find it, he said, not in 100 years, and we looked every day. Stones under the sand, a mouth of fresh water stopped up under the sand. My father! There was still no sign of the sea. You could almost believe it had withdrawn for good. But my father said we must go home. By his calculations we were still entirely safe, but we must go back in and not linger. When we turned, then I was frightened. The shore looked to be infinitely far away. I couldn't make out the chapel at all. The distance looked to be quite beyond my strength. But Arwen seemed unconcerned. She laughed and looked up at my father, and he held her hand very tightly and said nothing to worry about, we'd be safe home in no time. My hand he held tightly too, but I felt he hadn't even noticed how frightened I was, because he and Arwen were being so jolly together.